There is a fifth dimension, beyond that which is known by ordinary readers. It is a dimension as vast as history and as complex as human error. It is the middle ground between paper and page, between intention and accident, and it lies between the pit of printers' anxiety and the summit of their ambition. This is the dimension of discovery. It is an area which we call the bibliographic zone. In our previous video, we talked about regular formulas, but few things in this world are ever regular, and so now we have to talk about exceptions. A quick recap before we get started. The formula after the colon tells us how many gatherings there are, what they were signed as, and how many leaves each one of them has. Things in italics were not signed, but should have been in order to complete the sequence. The Greek letters pi and chi tell us that something is disrupting the sequence. In this formula, we have one gathering signed lowercase a with 4 leaves, a second gathering signed lowercase a with 8 leaves, an unsigned gathering that has been designated as capital A with 8 leaves, 2 gatherings signed B and C, each with 8 leaves, an unsigned gathering which the bibliographer has designated as chi with 4 leaves, gatherings signed D, E, and F with 8 leaves each, a second unsigned gathering designated 2 chi with 8 leaves, a gathering with 8 leaves signed G, and a second gathering signed G with 4 leaves, which has been marked with a superscript chi. That's a hideous formula, but it could be worse. You see, it assumes that the printer didn't try to fix any of their mistakes. When a printer adds or removes something from a set of gatherings, we mark that change with a set of parentheses and a notation as to what leaf or leaves have been added or removed. Before we can talk about parentheses, however, we have to talk about why something might be added or removed. We have to talk about cancels and cancellands. A cancel is a part of a book that has been substituted for what was initially printed, which is called a cancelland. Cancellands are physically cut out of the book, often leaving behind a stub, a mnemonic device that you may find helpful in telling the difference. A cancelland is larger, and then part of it is taken away so that a cancel can be inserted in its place. You can have a cancelland without a cancel, but you can't have a cancel without a cancelland. You can't replace something if it isn't already missing. You can, however, insert something without having to cancel it. Let's start with cancellands. Bibliographers identify leaves that have been removed from the book with parentheses and a minus sign. In this folio, we have a preliminary gathering with 4 leaves, 6 gatherings signed A through F with 6 leaves, and a final gathering G with 4 leaves. Gathering D was printed with 6 leaves, but leaf D5, the 5th leaf of gathering D, has been removed, meaning that gathering D only has 5 leaves. Now, if leaf D5 had been replaced, things would look a little different. If a cancelland, in this case the old D5, is removed and a cancel put in its place, the new D5, then the bibliographer will use parentheses and a plus-minus sign to show that something was removed and then immediately replaced. Or, to use a different example, let's suppose that we have a quarto book with 4 gatherings. If you'd like to pause the video to try to parse the formula, feel free, I'll wait. What we have here is a quarto book with 4 gatherings. 2 of them, A and D,
are just as the printer intended, but gathering B needed to have its second leaf cut out and replaced, and the first leaf of gathering C was removed but not replaced. You can also add an insert that is not a cancel. If a printer has to add another leaf or two to a gathering, a bibliographer may catch them in the act. When that happens, we note the leaf preceding the insertion and use a plus sign to show how many leaves have been added. What has happened here is that a leaf was added immediately after leaf C3. A more formal way of writing this would again use our helpful friends pi and chi. In this case, since the leaf is not in the preliminaries, the bibliographer would write plus chi1 to indicate that one leaf was added after C3.
Sometimes, a printer will add an entirely new set of leaves to a gathering. Remember that leaves are pieces of paper with a page on either side. Because leaves are formed by folding a sheet of paper, they typically come in pairs. And if a pair of leaves are joined at the fold, they are called conjugate leaves.
To identify two leaves that are conjugate, bibliographers will usually use a period. If leaves H1 and H4 are conjugate, and the bibliographer needs to note that, they will write H1.4. So, if a printer were to remove a pair of conjugate leaves from the book and replace them, we might wind up with a formula like this. This means that the conjugate leaf pair B2 and B3 was added to gathering B in place of a canceled pair of leaves. The bibliographer has had to do some detective work here to recognize this, probably using either an errata page or paper evidence, but that's their problem, not ours. All we have to do is understand what they're trying to say.
So let's recap. The information after the colon tells us what the gatherings were signed as and how many leaves each one of them has. Information in parentheses tells us when something has been added or removed from the gatherings. In our next video, we'll talk about the stuff after the $sign. Until then, stay safe out there.